to talk everybody into buying mine. And I used to read a chapter or two and then go up and talk to him about once a week to his ear. And I'd be really excited. Oh, this is how you do it, and this is how you do it. And eventually I get to the point where, well, this was cool. And he said, well, it's not exactly what I meant, but if it works for you, do it. And it took me years to realize that many people had read Jay's book and went so far and interpreted it one way, whereas I interpreted another way, and they kind of dead-ended, and I just kept going. And Bill Peters eventually convinced me that my system was not Jay's system, but Jay's expanded a lot by mine, and convinced me to write the book. So I guess I'll do a real brief, assuming everybody's looked at the video. Quick show of hands, who hasn't had a chance to yet? Just a couple. Hang in there, guys. And a couple that haven't admitted it too, but that's all right. First of all, I want to make sure everybody knows what symmetry is. You know, everybody talks about symmetry and versus most of our choreography, unless we do non-symmetric calling. But if you call heads do something, what the number one man does, the number three man does a mirror image of it. What the number two woman does, the number four woman does a mirror image of it. And we're counting on that, especially as sight callers, because we are trying to resolve the square by watching two couples instead of all four, and figure the other four will take care of themselves. The advantages, the order I said, reading, memorizing, etc. I put modules, mental image, and sight calling. And that order is intended for the amount of versatility that you have in calling, the amount of ability you have to freewheel, to ad lib as you're going, to pick up from where you were when you made a mistake, if you made a mistake. Modules, you're limited to what you've memorized, even though it's just bits and pieces. You memorize building blocks, but you have to put them together. Sight calling is total freewheeling. You can do what you want. Of course, the question is, can the dancers do what you want? But the disadvantage of sight calling is that you have to remember you have to memorize who started with whom. And that's something I've always had troubles with. And then when you've done that and start to bring them back together to resolve, one is you've got to, you know, I was taught you look at you get them in lines, and does this guy have his partner? If not, and is his partner here or there? And by the time I figured all that out, it was a moving target if I was going to keep them dancing, and I never ended up being able to identify who was what and where, because they were going so quickly. Unless I wanted to do total stop and go dancing calling, which I didn't want to do. And the big problem is, some sight callers may be aware, is occasionally your key square does something wrong, makes a mistake, and do you want to sacrifice the other 10 squares on the floor for them or not? So mental image will give you more versatility than modules, less versatility than sight calling, but no dependency or minimal dependency on the dancers. To review very quickly what I did in the video is I showed that the system was possible. I showed that all you had to do was follow the formation and arrangement, just like you do for a sight caller or a module caller. But in addition, you had to follow the position within that formation of one dancer, one key dancer, and only one key dancer. And if you followed a few other rules, and those three things would change pretty much with every call. But there's a few other things that don't change with every call, so they're easier to follow because they don't change every time. And if you keep those other rules that are in the background straight, then all you have to do is dance your key dancer to a given place on the floor. I like to think of it as a spot on the floor. For your Alaman left or your right and left grand, or however you want to set it up. And all the other dancers will automatically behave themselves and take care of themselves. And that's the trick, is how to get all the others to be there by themselves without following them, with only following the one active dancer. And I'm saying active dancer, even though I generally follow the number one man or the number three man, or you know, one of the men. All the rules that we talk about, except for the location of the spot on the floor you're dancing to, apply to if you follow an active woman. And as we talked about as Deborah talked about in the earlier session that we did today, following the women is an easier thing for women to follow, and it gives some variety to men. But all the rules we talk about here work equally well. So once you've memorized what calls cross exchange partners and what don't, they're all the same, no matter whether you're following a man or a woman. We talked about the fact that some calls exchange partners and some calls don't exchange partners. And you have to keep track. And as long as the calls don't exchange partners, which I call O calls, O for zero effect, you can call as many of those as you want and dance the guy to his spot, and everybody else will take care of themselves. If you call one X or exchange partner type of call, then you've got to call another one of those to cancel its effect so that everybody will take place. And it turns out any X call you call will cancel the effect of any other X call. It doesn't matter where in the square or what have you. Well, actually it does. And when I say I'm dancing in the middle or on the left or on the right, I'm talking about where the active dancer is in the square relative to the caller. Heads square through and do a bunch of stuff in the middle, partner, trade, pass the ocean, recycle. That's all in the middle of the square, so I talk about it in the middle. If I have the heads square through and work with the couple on my left, I'm talking about what he's doing on the left. The dancers on the right side are doing the same thing because it's symmetric, but I'm only worried about my active dancer and the fact that he's on the left. And it turns out, as we talked about in the video, that when all X's are canceled, it's possible to do an Alaman left. If there's an uncanceled X, the Alaman left will not resolve the square properly. And if you do the X, if you leave an uncanceled X in a location other than middle, left, or right, you cancel it in the same location, and that spot is right there where the men pair off, where the heads pair off. Just dance the guy to that. If you cancel the X in a different location, like do an X in the middle and an X on the left, it's still possible to do an Alaman left, but that spot moves. And I demonstrated a whole bunch of those things and can here also with the help of Tamnations, if anybody is interested. One of the things that panics people about doing X's, or this system, is memorizing X's. How do I keep track of them? Well, I have a number of comments on that. First of all, if you call a sequence of 3 or 4 or 5 calls and there's some X's in it, think about it as I've done the X, I've canceled it. I've done the X, I've canceled it. Don't think about I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 X's. Let's see, that's an odd number. Therefore, it's not canceled. Even numbers would be, because that's just too many darn things to think about. We got enough other things to think about when we're calling: timing, body flow, whether the moon's full or not, etc. So think about calling an X. Every time you call one, cancel it right away. Cancel it, and then call another one. If while you're learning, these are things, you know, I say it's kind of frightening to learn about X's, but while you're thinking, as you're trying to learn, a couple of hints. One, cancel the X pretty soon after you do it, so you don't leave a hanging X that you have to cancel later. It'll still work, but you won't remember it. Too many things to remember. Number two, there are some generalizations about X's that make them easier and eventually more common sense to remember. Let's take two couples facing each other. If I call head ladies chain, that's pretty obviously an X. I've exchanged the partners. You have a different temporary partner. If I call heads reverse flutter wheel, that's the same thing. If I call heads flutter wheel, I'm moving the guy across, but it's still, I'm exchanging the partner, from the temporary partner from whom I had. Resquaring your set, if I call step to a wave and the ladies trade, that's pretty much, hopefully obvious. Again, I've traded partners, changed partners. Well, it turns out that centers trade, ladies trade, men trade, ends trade. They're all the same thing. They're all X's. Same with runs, cross runs, men, women, they're all X's, and it makes it easier to follow that way. And if you have questions, we'll go further into X's later. But the last couple of things about learning these silly things, when you learn about a call, when you're first learning to call, you learn, let's say flutter wheel. It starts with two couples facing. It ends with two couples facing. The women exchange places. Or excuse me, the right-hand lady changes place. The right-hand dancers exchange places. So you have to learn a whole, and the body flow is this and that. And you have to learn a whole bunch of things about the call. So I'm making you learn one additional thing. It's an X. And again, I don't have to say it's an X or an O, it's an X or it's not an X, because if it's not an X, we don't have to worry about it. The other thing, and this I find really helps for people that really want to learn this system, especially people that already have a system that they're comfortable, site callers in particular. Why do I have to keep track of that when I can call anything I want and go back to my old habits? But if you're teaching a class of new dancers, the odds are the only X that you're going to teach in the first 5 or 10 lessons is ladies chain. And with that ladies chain, you can move the spot all over and practice. And so as you're teaching them, you're also teaching yourself. You don't have to do it every set, but every tip, but you every once in a while throw that in and practice that way. Some of the other advantages, you can practice while you're driving in the car. You don't have to have real dancers there. I used to drive a lot listening to the Handhurst tapes. Most singing calls are easy to follow with the mental image system. And that would help me practice it. Now, it turns out in general, following somebody else's choreography can be difficult, because when you're using the system yourself, you're sort of projecting what you're going to be doing, and you're setting some kind of a path out there. Still pretty freewheeling, but you're setting some kind of a path. But if you are trying to follow somebody else, you have no idea if he calls an X, whether he's planning to cancel it here or move the spot there or what have you. So it's a little more difficult. But in singing calls, pretty basic. pretty basic choreography. And jumping ahead, some of the advantages of knowing the system. If you want to do a grand right and left get out, basically dance the dancer to the spot and have everybody do a U-turn back. Let's see, let's go through something very, very hard here. Head square through, he's standing on the spot. Right and left through, half sachet, pass through. Mel, hide that. I've got mine set up to do when I want to show it. I'm not ready to show it. But thanks for trying. You should be able to follow this in your head. Head square through, right and left through, half sachet. To get him to his spot, you just do a pass through. But he's facing the other direction, so you can do a right and left brand. Any place time you get him to his spot, but he's facing the other way, you can do a right and left brand. And the same goes for the women, of course. One of the things that I found when I switched from mental image to sight calling was that instead of watching the whole floor, I started staring at my key square or squares. And that was unfair to the rest of the floor because I'd set my timing on whether they were flowing well or not, etc. So one of the things this gives you is the ability to watch the whole floor. One of the misconceptions of mental image is you don't fully have to follow everything in your head. I always watch the square, and even though I have to know what the formation is after a call I call, they give me a confirmation immediately that I've guessed that right or figured that out correctly. And so I follow the floor to watch what has happened after I've called it. And just following the floor really helps a bit. The other thing is following the key dancer. I will pick a guy on the floor or a woman and follow him through the square. I'm keeping track of my mental guide, but that person on the floor is helping me. Now, if that guy makes a mistake, no big deal. I just switch to another square and pick whichever guy is in that spot. The guy that made a mistake may have the problem, but I know the spot that he should have gone to if he'd gone where he was supposed to. And when I switch over to the other square, I don't care if that guy's made a mistake or not. He's still helping me with my mental image so that I can follow him to the spot he should have been had he not made a mistake and get the other 10 squares correct. The other reason why those that are comfortable with sight calling now might consider learning the system, and I've said many times, it's not particularly easy to learn. Once you've learned it, it's really easy to use, at least in its basic forms. And boy, I've gone over my 15 minutes. Oh, you didn't give me a 15-minute limit, did you? Like I give other people. I'm ready to open to questions, but
now it's all yours, Don. If you got more to say, keep going.
I'm going.
We've got nearly 50 people in here, so a lot of people are tuning in to hear what you say.
That's all those blank expressions I see, huh?
Are you open for questions now?
Now, let me just throw in a couple more things. As a sight caller, which I mostly think I am these days, I still use mental image a lot. I used to say I was strictly sight until I started thinking about it. I ad-libbed the figures on my singing call. Since I have troubles memorizing who started with whom, I really have troubles memorizing who started with whom, a different set of people each sequence, but I can very easily mental image ad-lib on my singing calls. It's one good reason for it. Another, before I'm in a place where I don't know the people, my first tip is frequently just mental image because I'm busy trying to see who the better dancers are, who the more familiar faces are or what have you. So I've got mental image to fall back on. I've called festivals where everybody comes in club costume. And so it takes more than one or two tips before I've figured out who started with whom, because they're all wearing the same colors. So it's a handy tool there. And there's some tricks with site calling that will help, that it helped me learn to resolve, for, excuse me, some tricks for mental image that helped me learn to resolve when I was doing site calling, and still may help. And the example I like to use, let's say I've got a guy on the left side and his partner on the right side of the square, and I want to match them up, and I call pass through trade by, and he goes over there, but she goes scooting to the other side. So I call their, you know, right and left through, your left couples circulate, he goes chasing her, but she goes chasing across the other way. Turns out if I call an X, any X, and then bring him over, she will stand there and wait for him. Handy thing to know if you've got that thing in your toolbox. There are a bunch of other things, but at this point, let's digress. No, let's progress into, does anybody have any particular questions, either whether you watch the video or not? Boy, did I explain it well. Come on, guys.
I've got a question, Don.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of guys and I see them crossing their fingers and uncrossing their fingers. Is that a good indication they're probably using some variant of your system?
Well, let me go digress a little to that. Well, I guess I said it in the video too, but I used to keep track in my mind. One of my caller students once said, whenever he calls an X, he raises his hand. Whenever he calls another X, he drops it. And when his hand is up, he knows that he has an uncanceled X he has to cancel, and when it's down and he's comfortable, he can do it. And I said, what do your dancers think of that? And he said, oh, I only do that in front of the mirror at home. So he and I talked about it, and we decided crossing fingers, that was an X, that was not an X. Uncanceled X, not an X. And if you had an uncanceled X, you could not call an Allemande left, you had to cancel it, move it somewhere. Now, that's a partial answer to your question, but I have heard, actually, I heard if you listen to the video, one of the guys in the group there said, well, Jerry Story does a lot of finger crossings frequently in his pocket. He's not using the mental image system. I think he uses it for across the street and not across the street. So I can't really say whether that many people are using the mental image system, or X crossing their fingers helps them with something else also. As far as people using the mental image system, I wrote the book about 35 years ago. I'm trying to remember. The day or the week after, sometime during the week after I got the book back from the printer the first time, after playing with it and working with it for 7 years, I met Gail Gordon, whom I eventually married, and this Monday is our 34th anniversary. So, and we knew each other for a number of years before that too. So it was around 35, 36, 37 years ago. I've been trying to teach people and convince people this is a worthwhile tool ever since. And I know some people that have really, really latched onto it and use it strongly, and others who think it's interesting, and others who don't. Chris Stacy, whom I believe is with us today, and I don't think you mind me mentioning Chris, but he's recently had some health problems where he's lost his sight, but he's still calling using mental image. It's been a real help to him. Couple of callers in Germany. Oh, I can't think of their names. That's pretty bad. Lawrence Cooley uses it. A real strong user of the system. Oh, Prescott, Mike, not Mike. Mike's in Alaska. His brother Dave in Germany uses it quite a bit. but really the percentage of people that do use it, I think, is fairly small, Rick. And I think it's a shame. Now, I know there are some of the newer people like Dan Like and I don't recall it exactly, that say just understanding the basics of how this does move people around and how calls at exchange partners has an effect on the choreography we know and love, finds it very helpful just for the foundation of understanding what it is. So I don't know if that answers your question, Rick, but probably more than you asked for. Any other questions?
I've got a few here that have come in. Sorry, I'll just get these out because I don't know if everybody's coming in, but a couple that were typed up. The first one was how many X's and O's, how are we supposed to memorize them? I put up a little list in chart, but the reality, other than crossing over the middle, which Don may talk about, there's 17 X calls. That's 1/4 of the mainstream program. At Plus, there's only 2. At A1, there's 5. And at A2, there's, I believe, 2. So that's it. That's all you'd have to remember. That's a very small amount when you consider all the calls. So and as Don said, you don't have to remember the O's. You just have to learn the X's. And yes, that'll take time. The second question was, is mental imaging a better system for women callers? This came from somebody who I've been talking to. I promoted it for lady callers as a method to bridge that gap between module calling and site calling, because as Deborah was saying earlier today, women tend to track the woman's position rather than the number one man's position, but callers tend to track the number one man and his corner, and it's the other way around. So I can't really answer that if it's a better system, but I know the beauty of the system is it doesn't really matter who you want to track, be it the number one man, number two man, number three lady, whatever, who you want to track, the system applies the same to everybody. Is that correct, Don?
Yeah, it does. We'll take a quick look at that in a second. As far as learning the X's, the book has a full definition of them if you wanted to really work one through. It tends to confuse people more than not, but I felt I had to put it in there. As I like to say, for the time being, just take my take my word for it. As far as learning them, partly what Mel said, there are far fewer X's than there are O's. And so you only got to learn about 1/3 or 1/4 of the calls to tag an X onto. Don't worry about the O's. More specifically, though, I would like to mention that X's and O's really only apply to 2 couple moves. They don't apply to all 4 couple moves. There's ways of extending, and you do some of that, and that'll come eventually. Next, I want to mention, as far as helping to learn X's and O's, and let me check my list here. Oh, yeah, here we go. Yeah, as I say, it becomes intuitive, but in one way it doesn't. So in my way of thinking, there are 2 kinds of calls. When you're looking in a north-south position, away from you and towards you, up and down on your screen, I call that, I call it the north-south direction. If you're looking from left to right or right to left, east to west or west to east, that's a different direction. So calls that start and end in the same direction. Now, north or south would be the same. They're still facing along the north-south line, either this way or that way. Calls that start in an east-west facing direction are still east-west, even if they do a 180. But calls that end you facing in the same direction you started facing, right and left through, do-si-do, ladies chain. Those are one set of X's. Calls that change facing direction, like star through, sweep a quarter, that go from north-south to east-west. There's a different intuitive feel for following those. So if you learn just the north-south facing ones, as I say, the obvious ones like ladies' chain, flutter wheel, from a wave, centers trade, ends trade, it's easier to learn those as a separate group than learning the ones that change facing direction. And I believe I have it set up in that list.
Yes, you do.
In that kind of a grouping. So to help, if you look at the original list of X's and O's in the book, it didn't have them arranged that way. It had it arranged by alphabetical, and it was totally less useful than this. So I've added, the second printing had this as in the appendix, this new list. That was one of the things you asked. Was there an, oh, I know I was going to say that if I call 2 or 3 calls, 4 calls, and can't remember if I did an X or not, I can generally remember that same sequence of calls. I'm going to call right now, heads past the ocean, recycle, sweep a quarter. Somebody, anybody, tell me what I just called. Just repeat those calls.
Heads past
Heads past the ocean, recycle, and sweep a quarter.
Perfect. Okay. And generally, if you've called that, you can even remember it better than hearing me call it. It turns out that if all the calls that I've called, the end result is an O, it's still an O because I haven't changed anything. It turns out if I've called that and left an uncanceled X, if I call that same sequence again, that'll cancel the X. So the chapter in the book, I call it, when in trouble, do it double. If you just called a series of 2, 3, 4 calls and can't remember if it's an X or not, repeat that same sequence and it'll cancel out. It's just a safety net that's kind of handy to have once in a while. Any other questions before we go and play some tricks here?
Yeah, Mel, I got one, Mel. Whose turn is it? Mel, you said in your thing that if you have an X in the center and you call an X on the right, it moves the spot. How about if you do an X on the right and then you have an X in the center? Is that the same? Is that
No.
the same spot?
Good question.
The order of where you called it?
All these little rules eventually generalize into pretty broad rules. If I call an X any place and then call one space to the right of that, so left and center or center and right, it moves the spot one place to the right. If I call an X, a sequence of X's that are one place, that are one and the next one is on the left, whether it be the right and center or center and left, it moves the spot one place to the left. So the spot moves one position in the direction of the sequence that you call the X's. Furthermore, if you call an X 2 places away, rather than in an adjacent location, but in 2 spots away, it'll move the spot 2 places. Or if you call it 3 places away, it'll move it 3 places. Now, how do you call it 3 places away? Does anyone, maybe if we have time, we can talk about 6-couple dancing, because it's pretty cool. You can ad-lib 6-couple dancing the same as you do this stuff, and it does the exact same rules apply. And, you know, I've called, you know, move it 5 spaces at once by calling the X here and 5 spaces over there. But that's jumping ahead a little. Any other questions? There were about 3 or 4, but.
Well, I have a question for you.
Yeah, you're there, Don.
Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
My question is, I've got myself into trouble, obviously. If I call the sides instead of the heads, do I switch the person I follow, or do I stick with my number 1 man but assume a different spot? Is it?
Jay King used to call for the sides and follow a head man in his position, in his mind. I thought that was crazy because, as I say, I like to use an active dancer on the floor to help me relieve some of my brain cells. So what I used to do was I would follow the number 2 man and turn and look to the side, standing sideways, so that he was effectively my number 1 man. Eventually, I learned I didn't have to do that anymore. But that was a crutch for me until I figured out, until I got my mental cells working better. But so you could do it either way, Alan, but I strongly suggest using the guy on the floor to help you. So if you're calling for the sides, watch the side man and know that his spot is in a different place.
Could I have a follow-up question, but I hope it doesn't jump you ahead of where you want to be. If I've accidentally called a series of calls that result in a rotation, maybe an inversion, what happens then? I found that it shifts my spot. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, I've got a number of calls on the list that I call across the center calls. If I'm in a position where I can pass through trade by and go from the left side of the square to the right side of the square, or if I do a couple circulate and I'm moving across, the spot doesn't change as long as that across the center movement includes me. If I, let's say, heads pair off, veer left, great choreography. Couples circulate, somebody went across the center, but it wasn't me. Are you with me, Alan?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Okay, so when it wasn't me, that means the inactives went across the center. And if the inactives went across the center, it means I moved my spot from a number 3 spot facing west to a number 3 spot facing east. In other words, above the line where the number 3 man would have been after a pair off. Inverting the square, I think you called it. When I wrote the book, I was looking for the right word for that. Bill Peters told me it was called flip-flopping the square. I didn't like the term, but if he told me, it must have been standard, so I used it. It's kind of a mouthful, but yeah. So as the 4 spots you saw in the video and on the handout are all west facing from number 1, 2, 3, and 4. You have 4 more spots above the line that are east facing 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so if you start with a sides right and left through, but you're planning to dance the heads, you've switched from a 3 west to a 3 east. And a star through pass through will get you to that spot. Does that cover what you were saying?
I think so, yes.
John, Ms. Lewis has been trying to get a question in for about 3 times.
Your turn.
I have a question for you. I have not been able to watch the video or read your book yet, but what I have been doing, and I just need some clarification, when I have been filling out my call analysis sheets, one of the things that I just automatically wanted to know was, does this particular call move me away from my partner or separate partners and stuff? So when you're saying X calls, is that what you're talking about? Is it separates them from their present partner, or am I missing something?
Almost. In fact, when I was doing some of my caller schools and passed out call analysis sheets, one thing I added was, is it an X or is it an O? But you're saying moves away from your partner. It turns out that it has more, X's and O's have more to do with facing direction than whether you're facing the same direction in your partner or a different facing direction. And it's not quite straightforward, like if you change partners. For instance, an example is this is one that changes the north-south facing couple to an east-west facing. If I do head star through, I've gone from having my original partner on my right to having my opposite partner on my right, but that's still an O. If I call heads, sweep a quarter to the left, or circle left 1/4 because we don't have any movement already, then I have my original partner next to me, but that's an X because it's a new facing direction. Very briefly, same facing direction, same partner is an O. New facing direction, new partner is an O, and everything else is an X. That's a lot to digest quickly, but hopefully that confuses you appropriately.
Well, no, actually, it made a lot of sense. It told me I need to add, does this change facing directions for the dancers on my call analysis sheet?
Well, maybe just add whether it's an X or an O as a starter, and use the handout that I gave to help you get there.
Okay, thanks.
And when you get the book, you ordered it already, right? I think it's in the mail, Janice.
I actually have it in my hands.
Oh, okay. Chapters, I don't know, 4 and 5 will give you a detailed description of what's an X and what's an O. And as I think a lot of people got confused when they initially read that and gave up on the book because it's kind of heavy thing. And so the intro to the second printing, I said, I was planning to just move it further back, and I said, nah, it really belongs there because of a couple little things I say. And so what I said was, read through it quickly, get a feel for what it is, don't sweat it at all, and then go back and study it when you're comfortable. So,
Hey, can I jump in here about that?
who's that? Chris?
Hey, Don.
It's Chris, and the thing that I would say about people are spending a lot of energy trying to figure out what's an X, what's an O, what is it that makes a call an X, and that's interesting. It's from as somebody who uses the system all the time, I never think about that stuff ever. I just memorized these are the X's and everything else is an O. I never think about why. It doesn't matter. You don't need to know that at all in order to use the system. It's interesting if you want to extend the system to calls that haven't been analyzed by Don already, and it's useful just generally, for understanding things at a deeper level. But in terms of actually getting going and using it, you don't need to know that at all. All you need to know is just like if I was filling out a call analysis sheet, I would just have the student refer back to the handout sheet, and they would look on their call analysis sheet and they would make a little notation that says, yeah, this one's an X. But just basically just memorize and not when you're first learning the calls, of course, and you're trying to understand all the things they do, then you're really obsessed, and you should be, with this one swaps the partner and does this and that and the other thing. But in terms of its relation to the mental image system, that relationship is totally optional as far as actually using the system. To me, it's like totally academic, and I use the system more than anybody I know. Maybe more than Don does lately.
Chris, wouldn't you agree that it really does become second nature pretty quickly?
Oh yeah, very quickly.
There's an intuitiveness to it that gets you there.
It's not a like I said, I just memorize them, and you don't have to memorize them all at once or anything. And as you're doing it, you look and you say, oh, is fan the top an X or an O? Well, that's an X. Well, after you've seen a few of them going by, you think, well, of course it is, but I never think about why.
That's one of the things that I always used to say was, once an X, always an X. Fan the top is an interesting exception. Speaking of fan the top, Chris.
Oh, I was thinking of from facing
from an ocean wave where it's done most of the time, it's an X. Turns out from a two-faced line, it's an O.
Right.
Chain down the line is another one that depends on starting formation. Most of the time it's an O, but if you do it from a left-handed wave, it's an X.
I find also that sometimes if I haven't used a call in a while or whatever, and I suddenly think to myself, not while I'm in the middle of calling the dance, mind you, but but I'm sitting at home and I suddenly think to myself, oh, wait a minute, is that an X or an O? You can, as you become more proficient with your call analysis, not related to mental image, but just your normal stuff that you're learning, you can, you'll start to see lots of, people get all excited about, let's learn equivalents and zeros and things. But what you'll find is that when you start looking at things like couples hinge and centers trade and fan the top and things like that, it'll all start to make a lot of sense, and you'll be able to, if you forgot if something was an X and you don't care to look it up or something, you can derive it by looking at it just the same way that you know that square through 4 or is an O, and so is pair off, obviously. So it is really intuitive.
Another, just a quick thing to help. Square through 4 is an O. Square through 3 is an O. Square through 2, square through 1, square through 17.
And the famous Don Beck square through 1 is also an O, and of course that's the same as pass through, and we know that's an O. It all just makes a lot of sense.
Except sometimes it has your left hand handy for an Alaman left, but and left square throughs, again, they're all O's, no matter how many and what have you. I guess I want to throw in a couple of going
Don,
a little beyond.
Just before you move on,
Yep.
2 more questions. One, in your video, you mentioned technical zeros, using this with technical zeros. The question come up, are there any technical X's and O's? And I think you've covered that with things like fan the top and etc. That was one of them. And the other one is lead left the same as an X call as lead right? And I believe that's on your list as well.
Yes, did I not put lead left in there? Lead left and lead right are both X's.
Yeah. They're in the
new facing
if you haven't
direction.
gone, and they're in the direction change.
As far, what was the other thing you just said? Oh, technical zeros. I wanted to get to
technical that. X's and O's.
I wanted to get to that in just a second.
Okay.
One of the things is the video is a 2-hour video, and you're just doing a good job of scratching the surface. But there's a lot more. We've only done left, east-west facing direction stuff. You can convert to north-south facing stuff. Let me give you an example. Heads square through, split the outside to around 1 to a line. You've got lines forward and back. Star through, California twirl. So now you've got north-south facing things. Those are all covered too, and there's 2 ways to get to those, and which Jay King called, and I still do, through the middle or around the outside, and they both have a interesting different effects on where the spot moves to. But you're not restricted to just what we've been doing so far. The system goes well beyond that. The other thing is technical zeros. I mentioned this to somebody recently, but I'll say the whole thing again. Most of you people that are using modules, you know what a true zero is versus a technical zero. A true zero will take you back to the exact same place you were. That's assuming you don't worry about location. It may rotate the square 180 or 90 or what have you, but everybody, the facet is exactly the same. A technical zero will generally act as a zero, but there's sometimes it doesn't work. It does change actives and all that, but effectively a zero, if you insert it in a given place, you can do from that formation, it has no effect on the rest of the sequence that you've memorized or are moving or going from one module to another. In technical zeros, some of them are pretty cool, but some of them work and some of them don't. And a lot of people shy away from technical zeros because they don't know if they're going to work or not. And as I like to say, if there's a 50-50 chance they will work, there's a 70-30 chance they won't. So once you learn mental image, it's pretty cool. It turns out that if all X's are canceled, technical zeros work. If there's an uncanceled X, they don't work. They effectively have a 4 ladies chain kind of effect. But basically, for the typical module caller, you want to know that if all X's are canceled, technical zeros work. If there's an uncanceled X, they don't work. Now, the thing that Mel continued to work with or mention is I found out that there are some technical zeros that are just the other way. You have to do an X before them and an X after them, and then they zero out. Again, any X, anytime before and any X after, anytime after. One that I use an awful lot that is ping pong circulate. If I do heads past the ocean, I could recycle, pass through, I could square through, well, let's do a ladies trade recycle, pass through to the corner. I don't think that's the example I want. What do I want to do? Yeah, that'll do. Heads past the ocean, I can do a ladies trade, recycle, pass through to the corner. But if I want to use a ping pong circulate and just memorize the previous module, previous get out, I'll do a heads past the ocean. Now I'll do an X, ladies trade. Now I'll do a ping pong circulate. Now I'll cancel that X with a ladies trade. Now I've got to do my previous get out, ladies trade, recycle, pass through. Mel was looking while you were crossing your fingers up there. I was thinking, geez, I hope this works. I hope this works. Maybe that's what the cross fingers are for. Another one that requires an X before and an X after to be a zero is all 8 circulate. Another is column circulate 2 places. The caller school I was in many years ago, one of the instructors said, you know, I do a heads square through, swing through. I know I can do a boys run, wheel and deal, but before the boys run, wheel and deal, I can call all 8 circulators as often as I want. And then boys run, wheel and deal. And he just knew that worked. I knew it worked because it had an X swing through before it, an X after, boys run. And so the all 8 circulate just zeroed out as many times as you wanted. As I've said to a number of people, why learn this? Oh, academically, it's pretty cool to know that there are rules that govern this strange hobby that we have. It's just academically cool to see it all fall into place. So I did cover that there can be north-south facing things. The east-west converts to the north-south, which I didn't get to in the 2-hour video, but you're not just restricted to that. As I said at the very beginning of when learning this stuff, I lay on tons and tons and tons of restrictions, and then we lift them at one at a time. And when you're done, you have tons and tons of choreography, ad-lib choreography available, but we still haven't lifted all the restrictions so that you can call as much as a sight color. Now, this I found has a certain advantage. The calling you do with mental image tends to be a little on the less difficult for the dancers. More of the standard positions as may be. You know, the Color Lab has a book of standard positions, which makes dancing a lot less difficult. You can still do a lot of variety without making it too difficult. And sight calling, because you can go anywhere, sometimes you can get carried away and be more difficult than the dancers can handle. So if you want to keep a grip on the difficulty, and there's lots of ways of looking at what's difficult and what's not, but that's good for another few sessions. Mental image tends to be a little more standard position-y, and therefore less likely to lose your dancers.
We've
For
got
the
time
average
for a couple of more questions for Dawn. The first one is from Jeff Garbett. So you had a question, Jeff?
Yes, thanks. Hi, Don. In your book, in the conclusions chapter, you mentioned about, and for example, an exercise for the developer could be to develop rules that will follow spot movements when an XL or XR is cancelled by an XT, XM after converting to north-south columns through the middle or around the outside. Have you got very far on that?
That's an excellent question. I'll see if I can come up with a semi-excellent answer. I haven't gotten too far. I know that if I do an X in the middle and then switch from east-west to north-south, it's still an X in the middle. So if I do an X in the middle, you can, and then switch to a north-south, that will still count as an X in the middle, and you can move your spot north and south that way. The one big breakthrough I had, and if I go to a third printing, and I may have to because I'm pretty low on this group here, and if anybody's well enough into the system, I can send them a paper on it. I had this breakthrough about 4 years ago. But if I do head square through, slide through, past the ocean, you all with me?
Yes.
If I did a split circulate instead of an all circulate there, all eight circulate, it blew me away with the system that I knew before. I didn't know how to handle that because I used to think, because split circulate is an X, and all of a sudden I didn't have any uncanceled X's, and I was thinking maybe if I shift my focus from north-south to east-west, that's an X, but that didn't make sense and it didn't follow through. So I finally had this breakthrough of if I call a split head square through, touch a quarter, split circulate, it's an X because I'm working with that same 4. But if I did the slide through past the ocean, split circulate to the other side of the square, it turns out split circulate is not an X there, it's an across the center movement. And even if I'm working with boy, girl, girl, boy things over there, it's pretty handy to call the same X's and O's and get out of that mixed pairing situation, either with another split circulate or several different ways. It was very exciting for me, and I wrote something like a 12-page paper on that, and it's available if anybody wants it, and hopefully will be in the 3rd edition as an appendix, 3rd printing. Yes, John? Or are you just waving? Oh, you're waving goodbye. Thank you for coming. Nice seeing you for 4 hours today or something. Jeffrey, does that answer your questions?
Yes, it does. And I look forward to the 3rd edition when it comes out. Wouldn't mind seeing those papers you talk about.
If you're interested in that paper, send me just send me an email at donbeck@donbeck.org and it'll get to you, and I'll send it to you.
Got your email address. Thank you.
Yes, you do. We've been back and forth a couple times on the book order. I was repeating it for the general public.
Don, one last question before you go to your displays. The question came in, a lot of people are asking, you use ping pong circulate. They cannot find it on your list. How does that fit into either an X or an O?
Well, that's one of those things that is not a 4-dance or a 2-couple thing, but a 4-couple thing, which isn't a total pure X or O. So it doesn't fit. I've learned to use it as a 0 as a technical 0 with X's on either side. There are a lot of calls that are like that, that don't quite fit in, but I have analyzed and done it. Can't remember if it's in the book or not. I'm pretty sure it's not on the list, but let's take coordinate. I'm going to do a head square through, giving you time to think, slide through, touch a quarter, and coordinate. Follow the guy sort of down to the middle trading and back out to the closer end of the two-face line on the left.
Mm-hmm.
Now, interestingly, it's easy, you know, without much practice, it's easy to follow where that guy went. What's the status with an X? Well, it turns out it did an X in the middle. So I could dance back to the middle and cancel that X. I could call bend the line and cancel it on the left and move the spot one spot to the left. I could start out by canceling, doing an X in the middle before and having the coordinate, cancel it. Two ladies chain, head ladies chain. Start from the beginning. Head ladies chain, head square through, slide through, touch a quarter, coordinate. And now there are no canceled X's because the coordinate canceled the one I did originally in the middle. And now the fastest get out I can think of is everybody take half a step back and slide to the right so you're facing your corner. But I don't think I'd call that. Does that answer? Let's see, I'm trying to think if there were others in that category. I've recently learned a little more how to use wheel and deal from lines facing out, but that's too much to talk about here.
The other one that came up that's along the same question is on a ping pong circulate. If you look at, you've got a partner trade in there, but you've got a crossover in the middle. Is that the same as an X that needs to be canceled?
Partner trade is not an X.
No, I know. You've got it, but you've got a trade, and that's what I wanted to clarify, because trade is the way you explain trade. You've just listed trade, but that's not partner trade in the way you're explaining it. And I think that's what the question is.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Don, this is Ray here from Vermont. Years ago, Franny Hines and I and Russ Peterson were playing with this system quite a bit. And Franny discovered that in his mind, the ping pong circle did a four ladies chain, or you move your spot two places to the right.
Yep.
So if I did a heads past the ocean and a ping pong circle, I would still watch this. Nobody would move my mind. I just watched that same guy where I did a ping pong circle. But then I did a pass through and a right and left through. He's in the number one slot now for an Allemande left. See what I'm saying? Or am I going too fast as usual?
No, I'm with you completely because it's very true. A technical zero that has an uncanceled X has the effect of doing a four ladies chain. And doing a four ladies chain has the effect of moving the spot two places. If I want to start with a squared set and call four ladies chain, and then the heads do something, that's moved the spot from the 3 to the 1. I could do four ladies chain, heads past the ocean, heads half square through, right and left through, and the man's on the number 1 spot. So yeah, it's a combination of all those things. And it makes perfect sense, Ray. And it's interesting to hear that Franny was thinking about those things too. He was quite the entertainer. So again, exchanging technical zero where the X is not canceled beforehand, or one that's supposed to have an X before and after and you don't have it, effectively has a four ladies chain. When Jay King did this stuff originally, he wasn't doing as much spot moving, but he would start with a four lady. He'd show if you started with a four ladies chain, then the spot was over on the right side. He showed if you did a four ladies chain 3/4, and you got your corner lady, then the spot would be, I should know that, four ladies chain, you have your corner, that's 4, so The number 2 lady is across from you. So it's the number 2 Alaman spot. 4 ladies chain 3/4 and head star through, pass through, square through 3/4 Alaman left. That was sort of the approach that he took to teaching it, but I thought it was, he had to set up the spot beforehand with a 4 ladies chain certain amount. He also called X's ladies chain effect. I should give credit, I wanted to do it earlier, I did it in second printing. The terms X and O for exchanging partners and 0 effect I got from Ron Schneider. When a school I went to, because I heard he used the system and I wanted to learn more. At the time, I believe he only used the Alaman 3 spot, but he managed to cancel X's to get there. Ray, does that answer your question?
Perfectly, thank you.
Good.
We have a question from Mike Gormley.
Yeah, I have a question. As to the reference point for the Alaman spot, you say if you X in the middle and X on the right, it moves the spot to the right, and vice versa. If you X in the middle and X to the left, it moves the spot to the left. But is that as viewed down on top, you know, of the square to the right or left, like clockwise, counterclockwise, or is that from the standpoint of the dancer, your key man dancer, and which way he's facing, and it's to his right or his left?
That's a good question. It's not to his right or his left, because it's actually front and back to him, or it depends on where he is. It's to the caller's point of view. You know, if you look at, let me switch over to my desktop, if I can do that.
I mean, to me, it would make sense just to say, looking down on the square, is it clockwise or counterclockwise when you say right?
Mel, can I share my, can I share my screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I tried, but it says you gotta let me.
What? Hang on.
Host disabled attendee screen sharing.
That shouldn't.
Should be under security.
Don, try it now, you're a co-host.
Okay.
It's ticked. I don't know why it's not working. I got your screen up on mine.
Oh, I got it now. Now let's see if I can get this going and get these.
Yeah. Right click your mouse and just refresh.
Right click my mouse, huh? I'm trying to get your face out of the way so I don't, but we'll leave it with that. So, oh, geez.
Yeah.
Yeah, couple number 2 is missing.
Yeah, they took a break.
Yeah, Don, just unshare, maximize your screen and then share it again.
All right. Desktop 1. Share. Oh, that didn't help. That's my desktop. With everything nicely hidden. New share. Safari Temnations. Share. Let's unmaximize. Resize a little bit here. Oh, I see.
If in trouble, do it double.
Yeah. Sometimes I try it 20 times and it's still. So you guys can see all that right now, right?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Yes.
I forgot settings. Answer identification, none. What were we going to prove? This is, I can't get the number 1 guy to go, and I don't want to have all the others visible, so I'll continue to point at the head man that I'm using as an active. Let's do the 4 ladies chain.
Don, I can black mine out and just get the number one couple white if you want to have it that way.
No, I don't want the number one. I just want the number one man. So we did a 4 ladies chain. This is still our active guy. I've got my cursor a little larger so it's easier to see. Now I'm going to do heads past the ocean. Ping pong circulate. Centers? No, why doesn't no ping pong circulate?
Spelling.
Huh?
You're spelling of circulate.
Oh,
Circ's enough.
here we go. So we did the 4 ladies chain before, so that moved the spot to number 1, and now the ping pong circulate has moved it back to number 3. So I'm going to do a ladies trade and recycle to get a double pass through formation. Oh, I got to say centers on that. Did an X, got to undo it. So we had moved the spot over to here with the 4 ladies chain. Ping pong circulate moved it back to here. It did an effective 4 ladies chain. So if I do centers pass through, can I just call pass through because they're the only ones that can do it?
No.
No. And now if we identify couples, we should be number, so it's effectively done a 4 ladies chain, changed actives, but my number 1 couple is together and number 1 man is facing his corner and her partner is right there. Does anyone want to see a sequence where we follow the number 1 woman?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful for the lady callers.
It should be for all of us.
It should be.
Okay, so I'm hiding the identities. We're going to follow this woman. Somebody give me a call. Oh, by the way, we've got to move her to this spot looking this way. This is where her spot is. But when we resolve, we got to get to an 8 chain through formation, move her to this spot looking this way. Somebody give me a call.
Heads, half square through.
Let's see if it understands that. Okay, so we've followed her to this spot here. Another call.
Got your quarter.
Got your quarter. We followed her to this spot here and we have an uncanceled X. Give me another one.
Walk and dodge.
Walk and dodge. So we followed her to here. Walk and dodge is an O. We still have an uncanceled X. Where are we going to go from here? And I don't want to go to vertical lines. I want to stay in these.
Partner trade.
Partner trade. So we followed her here. We still have normal couples. We still have an uncanceled X.
Boys run.
We could do that, but I just as soon not do that right now. I want to do an X with these 4 over here and then dance that woman to this spot.
Past the ocean.
Past the ocean. That's an O.
Recycle gives you the X.
Okay, so we're going to do a recycle now. This is still our active person.
Recycle is the canceling X.
Recycle, so all X's are canceled. We're following this person, and we have to bring her to this spot.
Pass through trademark.
Oh, Mel, you should have let somebody else do it. I knew you could do
Oh,
it.
sorry, I thought my mic was muted. Sorry.
Well, I was actually going to say that same thing, and I thought, oh, somebody else thought of the same thing.
I do. I'm sorry. I really am. I thought I had my mic muted.
Trade by. Oh, I pushed the shift key instead of the enter. So this is our active person. She's on the spot. All X's are canceled. By right, if I give you some identifying numbers here, we should have number 1 couple, number 4. Well, I'm still thinking is the man facing his corner, but she's facing her corner, etc. Does that sound pretty cool? Does that answer? You want to see another one like that, or? Everybody went home. I don't blame them.
I could do another one.
Yeah, do another one, but this time just let the ladies do the call, pick the calls.
Sounds good. Okay, we squared our set. We're hiding identities. Whoops. We're following this woman. Let's have a call for the heads to follow this woman. Or do you want to call for the sides and follow this woman to standing here, facing this way? Either one. Somebody give me a call.
I would look at number 4 lady.
You want to look at number 4 lady. That's this one here.
Yes.
I like that.
Okay.
Because I can't see number 2. If I was calling, I can't.
Gotcha. That works. Follow her to this spot right here, facing south. Give me a call. Sides what?
Side square through 4.
That didn't sound like a woman's voice. Somebody suggested we keep it to women.
Sides flutter wheel.
Why can't I type? So we're following her back to this same spot, but we have an uncanceled X. Somebody give me another call. Some woman.
And sweep a quarter.
I don't know if it'll do that or if I have to go back.
You have to go back and type it in with the flutter wheel.
I think so, yeah. But I like that. Reset. Sides, flutter wheel, and sweep 1 quarter. So we're going to be following this woman here. So, and now sweep a quarter. The sweep a quarter canceled the X. Her spot is still here. Somebody give me a call.
Pass through.
Pass through.
Pass through.
We're following her. Oh, center's pass through. Sorry. So we're following her. She's standing on our spot facing this way. We have an 8-chain through formation with normal couples. We could call an element left, or we could keep dancing. Your choice. You want to see the proof that we're where we're supposed to be? Bang. Number 1 and 4 are facing each other. She has her partner handy. He has his partner handy. It works either way. Rules are always the same. Any other general questions?
Don, would
Yes.
you mind dancing corner box with a invert rotate, the normal standard one we all use, slide
Okay.
through, pass through, bend the line, slide through. Yeah.
Okay, let me,
Hide your couple numbers, Don.
oh, yeah. So, heads square through. Nice spelling.
Who are we watching on this one?
I'll point to it before I push return.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to be watching this guy right now. And he's going to end up here. Was that Alan that was talking? Because I'm only watching my screen here.
Yes.
That's correct, Don, yeah.
You want to do a slide through, pass through, bend the line.
Slide through, yeah.
Slide through, right, okay.
At the moment, his position's number 3, Alaman 3, right?
Yes.
Slide through. We're following him. Pass through. We're following him. Bend the line, we're following him. Now what we're doing here is we're changing east-west lines to north-south lines. And we're doing it with a method called around the outside. And that's going to move the spot. This is getting way ahead, but it's going to move the spot 2 places. So it's going to move it from a 3 to a 1. And it's going to move it to either 1 down facing here or 1 facing up here. And in this case, it's going to follow the man, go in the same direction as the active man is. That's pushing a lot, but we're going to show it anyway. Bend the line. Whoops. B-E-N-D.
BTL.
Oh, really? I haven't learned the shortcuts yet. So he's here. His spot has moved from 3 west to 1 south. So we're going to do a slide through. And he's here facing south. And he should be on his spot. Everybody should be, this should be number 1 woman, number 4 lady, number 4 man. And somebody in the house is running a vacuum cleaner or something. You can probably hear that. Sorry about that, it stopped. So again, here's our active guy. He's moved to a number 1 spot, number 2, 3, 4 spot, his corner and partner. Let's,
Don?
Yeah.
The reason for my question was that bend the line from 2 couple is on the list and bend the line from 4 wasn't. And so while I was working through, not having the book yet, I thought, okay, bend the line. I'm not sure about that, but then slide through. And I was unable to explain the 2-person shift, but obviously there's a rule for it. Thank you.
Again, rules from going east-west to north-south. And whether you go through the middle, like square through 4, split 2 around 1, or pass through, separate around 1 or 2. There's one rule for following the spot there. And if you go around the outside, pass through, bend the line, or pass through, bend the line this way, there's another rule for following where the spot goes. In all cases, it moves 2 spots. We went from 3 to 1. But whether it moves clockwise or counterclockwise depends on whether you get there through the middle or around the outside. Let's
Could I just add one further question then?
You may.
If we just stick with the normal east-west quadrant and we do a single circulate rather than the normal move the full couple across.
Yeah.
What's the rules relating to that? Is that still through the center or not?
If I do head square through, slide through past the ocean, And then instead of all 8 circulate, do either centers or ends circulate? Is that what you mean?
Yes, yes, that's correct, yes.
There is a rule for that. I don't use it too much, so I don't remember it perfectly, but it will move the spot one direction in the direction that the active man is facing, I believe. Even if it's the girls that circulate. But you'll have to look in the book when that gets to you, Alan. It is, by the way, I can't remember it exactly. Let me try something here. I just want to undo the slide through. And we got to this spot here by doing a slide through, but we can get there any way we want. Just all we have to do, and let's hide identities. I'm going to do a touch a quarter over here. That is an X. I'm going to do a men run to cancel it. Yeah, let's do a lady. Let's make some awkward calling, but let's do a men run. Now he's over here. If we do a partner trade, that'll put him on his spot, and everybody else should take care of themselves. Did I spell it wrong? Or do I have to designate who?
And there you go.
Don't talk to me, Mel. Talk to my fingers. So that put him back on the spot without a slide through. And everybody else was doing their own thing. And we canceled X's. And again, partners, corners, partners.
Don, I'd like to just add one thing in.
Yep.
Depending on the experience level of the callers, what Don has said before and in a lot of his presentations, start, for instance, with your 2 couple practicing the X's and O's, move on to the next stage, practicing your X on the left, cancel on the left, then a center left, one step at a time. And once you start going through the book and looking at these one step at a time, you'll find out that each section actually builds onto the next section, onto the next section. Where it becomes really hard is for people that are already sight calling to set your sight calling aside and put an open mind and say, I'm going to do this one step at a time, building through. Once you do that, you'll find out what the power of the system is. For new callers, this system works very much like a bridging gap between, I've now learned modules, I can set up a corner box or a partner line and call a module. With this system, you can do exactly the same thing, but you can set up to your number 3, that would be your corner box, call your module, then do an X and O and set up another place. Call a module, come back and cancel it, call a module, and just build progressively through the system. That's how it will work. But you have to take a step back from what you know to learn something new in here, and you'll find it'll become really, really powerful.
As I've mentioned to a few people with emails, if you want to learn the system that I presented in the video and actually want to learn to use it, and that will give you quite a bit. Pretty much doing what Mel said, go back and watch the video again up until the first part of, we're just dancing with canceling X's in the middle, or dancing even before that, just dancing O's in the middle. And practice that a whole bunch of times, just different things in your mind, and check them with your checkers if you want. And then start the video and see what the next step is, and going out to the left and canceling all X's there. And practice that till it's comfortable. I was just thinking of another thing. Let me square this set here and do a head square through. let's say you've got somebody that says, I'd love to have a new module, a new zero that gets me back to this spot, a zero from here to there. Can you help me create one? And so let me make these guys disappear. I'm going to dance these guys around, just keep them on the left and bring him back to here with all X's canceled. Somebody give me a call. Let me just jump in and save some time. Spin the top. Sing the top. So we did I forgot to follow the guy. Was that this one?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And it's an X. Let's do a single hinge. Here we go. That's this guy. Let's do a men run.
An XX cancel.
Oh, the single hinge canceled to spin the top. The men run is a new one. And now a right and a left through. No, we got to cancel that X, the men run.
Yep.
So I'm going to do a flutter wheel. Reverse flutter would have been much smoother, but I'm just going to do a flutter wheel because I want to get the guy back on his spot. So flutter, I'm pointing with my finger here. Flutter wheel is going to move this guy over to here and cancel the X.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've just created a zero, spin the top, single hinge, men run, flutter wheel. And what? And canceled all X's. So that's effectively a zero. Let's take a peek and make sure everybody's back. So, you know, somebody wanted a zero with spin the top. We've just given them a zero with spin the top. Again, it would have been better. Let's start over again. Head square through.
Oh, well, you didn't say a good zero.
Here's our spin the top, single hinge, men run, flutter wheel. And we're back to zero. So again, if you want to create, and this was back when there were a lot more experimentals, you could easily do this. All you got to do is throw it in, move your dolls around, make sure X's are canceled. And if you found out that they weren't canceled correctly with your dolls, you know that experimental was an X, and you didn't have to cancel it or what have you. And the same with equivalents or other modules. Any other things you want to see danced? Any other things you want to ask about? If not, I don't even see how many of us are left here. There's still quite a few.
I like the idea of terminations.
35, Don.
The numbers.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. I heard Mel's comment. I didn't hear the other one.
I'm sorry. I like the idea of terminations of getting rid of the numbers. Well, I haven't done that with them.
So do I. It's because usually, well, if you've seen the video, I have these magnetic dolls, and I really like them. But you know, even colors here, it helps you if you want to practice mental image. You go to none, and it helps you just not focus on any of the others, because all we want to do is focus on one man, whichever active dancer you pick. And by eliminating the colors and eliminating the numbers, gives you a good thing to practice with. And yeah, I like that.
I've actually sent him an email.
Say that again?
I said I've actually sent him an email about terminations itself. That Are you still on share screen there, Don?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
did I go away?
No. Well, if you want, unless there's something else that you want to look at.
No, in fact, I'd go if I could figure your screen sharing. Stop share. Here we go. I get to see all your smiling faces again.
I don't know what happened there, but mine just locked up.
All righty.
But anyway.
So you're sending terminations to see if you can get them to do a.
Yeah. So like where you were saying, for instance, it would be good to follow one.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Bloody hell. Okay, so can you see my screen there?
Yep.
Okay, so you've got the one couple. So if I was going to do what you did, so you can follow either the lady or the man, but I got your fingers now.
Guys, see what.
Yeah, same kind of thing. There's the X.
Yeah.
There's the cancel.
So I think I mentioned earlier that if you use SD, particularly if you use SD that's within Square Desk, they do have a mental image mode, and you can just follow one person.
Yeah, and what he's now looking at doing is trying to get this so that you can individually color the individual dancers. We can do dancer numbers, but we can't select them individually. So what he's looking at doing is, if we can do this without the numbers, we can still put the couple numbers on and off, but be able to color the dancers individually so that we can actually turn everybody black except the one that you want to follow. And it'd be a great little practice tool for working this.
Yeah. What I'd love to have a key combination that can switch back and forth to show couple numbers and turn them off. But that's.
Yeah. Well, right now it's a button click, but.
Yeah, but I have to aim my arrow, my cursor.
Yeah. So I would like to point out, Don, you said you're going to give about a 15-minute talk and answer questions. We're almost now at an hour and 45 minutes.
But I'm having fun.
I know. Like I said, the room is open for as long as you want it. If you've got questions, this is a time. I would also like to note that Don has made himself available. He's doing classes on mental imaging with groups of people. So if you want to get in on these, I think they're booking up fairly quickly. So you'll have to arrange with Don. Product placement, Don. I believe you're going to be doing a new run, or you're going to have to be doing a new run on your book fairly soon. Please let us know where it is. And if you could send me an advertisement for your book, we'd love to get that in BTM and get that out so that they know how to get a hold of it and get some copies of it for here in Australia.
At this point, my first printing 35 years ago was 1,000 copies. Then when that ran out about 6 years ago, or 8 or 10 years ago, I went for a while without. The second printing, I only did 100 copies because I didn't think they would sell as fast as the first one. And they haven't, but the 100 are down to 2 or 3 or 4. And I don't want to advertise it yet because I've had maybe 6, sold maybe 6 in the last 2 or 3 weeks because of just talking about it here. So those are going quickly, but I'm in contact with the printer to find out what printing costs are currently, because everything goes up. I've noticed postage has gone up too, so I've got to have to redo that a little bit, unfortunately. But when I get the next printing, then I will give you info on advertising it, I guess. I was a little concerned, Mel, when you posted the handout for the talk, for the video, because it's intended for people who have watched the video. The first 2 pages are for anybody, but the next 4 pages, to read it cold without having watched the video could be kind of confusing to people. But
I did put in there to watch the video, and this is the handout that supports it. But
yeah, and if I had really been concerned, I would have complained to you. but I decided not to. But if anybody just read the handout and didn't watch the video, good luck. Anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to, as I've said before in places, as a caller coach, I know a lot about a lot of phases of calling, but this is one that I happen to know and love, and I think have more expertise than many of the other caller coaches. So I've decided to emphasize or share this part of my knowledge rather than just give a different version of what some other people say, although I give my 2 cents worth on other things too. So I'm glad to have the opportunity to make more people aware of this, and hopefully you guys will profit from what we've talked about and what you continue to learn with this. And I'm always available for questions on it. And thanks, Mel, for forcing me to think about an intermediate conversation. Yes.
Do you think there's value in asking Caller Lab to put beside their list, which are just in brackets, X? It's a small thing to ask them to include, and that way they're publishing the X list.
I don't think so, Alan. On Caller Lab's knowledge base, this video is available, and the handout is available, and another version of this video, if anybody wants to see a parallel, is available on the Caller Lab knowledge base too. Even though they didn't record it properly and didn't get to the end, but just as I don't think it would be of value to anybody that didn't know what it was for, and it might confuse people. I don't know. As far as just putting it there. And as I said before, I have the original printing had a list of calls and had X's and O's, you know, what they were and what they did. And I didn't, in later working with it, I came up with this new list that's in the appendix of the second thing, the one that was in the handout, that has them organized by O's and X's rather than just alphabetical calls and then listing whether they're an X and O or what have you, and grouping them that way I think was easier. One of the things, just as a slight background, Alan, is not that many years ago, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, somebody reported back to me that they'd been to a caller school run by a Caller Lab accredited caller coach, and he was telling them that there's reading and modules and site calling, and then there's this thing called mental image, but you've got to have a computer mind like Don Beck to understand what it is. That got me kind of infuriated, because I like to think that this is simplified things by following only one person, and that if you learn step by step, it can be a useful tool. So I went to the Caller Lab accredited caller coach committee's head, and I said, it's come to my attention that there are several caller coaches that have no idea what this is all about. I'd love to do my presentation for them. And I did, and made them aware of you know, the same basic video that you guys just looked at. Several years later, I think it was Tony Oxidine said, you know, we haven't, this is in the caller coach group, he said, we haven't had Don give his presentation for a while. So I've given it to him twice. And that second time is the one that is also on the Caller Lab caller coach, on the Caller Lab knowledge base thing. It's maybe going a little bit different pace, because I'm expecting, I know that caller coaches know what symmetry is and all that other stuff. So it goes at a different pace. And for some reason on the recording, they never did get to the end. So it doesn't end with my summaries and such. So if you're only going to watch one, watch the one that I recorded. But if you want to hear a different version of the same thing, if you're just reviewing it, there's another source to go to. And And Color Lab, as they say, on their knowledge base does have the lists available. It's just not on their main lists available, because I don't think it would confuse a lot of people, especially dancers that might read them.
One of the hard things that works for, or that a lot of callers have problems with, especially if they're teaching and they're asked about mental imaging. I hear that a lot, that it is a great system to use, but it's hard to learn. And my argument has been like what I said at the beginning. It's not hard to learn. It's hard to set aside what you already know and try something new with an open mind. Because if you learn it step by step, it's easy. It's just like asking a master caller to step back and use one resolution technique only. You'll see 100 different things, and it's very hard for them to do that. I did get one question here, if you still got time. Larry has asked, it's a question about one of the sequences, so you'll have to probably pull up your terminations to explain it to him, but it's one of these that switches to also your direction and angles. If you do a heads pair off, touch a quarter, scoot back, centers trade.
Hold on. Unfortunately, I forgot to listen. I was back.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, this time I'll listen.
Okay, we'll do it at mainstream here. Head square through.
Yeah. Oh, you want me to type it in?
Yep. Touch a quarter. Scoot back. Centers trade. Centers run. Ferris wheel. And centers pass through. I think the question falls into the O into the corner box, X, 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 Ferris wheel through the middle. And he's just wondering where you go to that to solve, because you're in a, if I look at that, what is that? That's corner.
Well, okay.
Yeah, okay. He's facing his corner, but he doesn't have his partner.
If I were setting up an example at the beginning, like saying you call it and I'll prove it works, when he got to the center's trade after the scoot back, I would say tilt. I can't follow that. That's switching people from the working on the box on one side to working with the box on the other, but it's not an across the center type of thing.
Yeah.
Now that breakthrough I had several years ago in the paper I've written, I told you by doing a split circulate across. This is one of those things that could be followed with that, but it's not a straightforward thing. It's another one of an across the center type of thing. It's pretty much pushing the limits of what we're doing with it.
Yeah, and I thought I could not explain this one either. I'm looking, just following that in my mind. I know I've got the number one man facing his corner on the bottom left, but number one partner is also paired up with the lady in the center. The head lady's in the, the head lady's in the center. So looking at that, that doesn't fall into the X's nose, but it also hits that line change, direction change, and across the center, all sort of working together. And I had no way of answering this.
It's the center's trade after the touch a quarter that is going beyond. Let me cite out of this. Whoops.
Voyage trade.
star through, pass to the center, square through 3. I don't know.
Yep. And I was doing the same thing, except if you just undo that one, the bend the line. It was this, to me, it was the center's trade that messed it up. So this is where I would just do another center's trade.
Let's,
that's that chapter that you wrote, if in trouble, do it double.
Yeah.
and that just takes us back to that baseline resolution technique, because that paired
true. You can do that too.
Yeah. I don't know if that answers the question, Larry, but that's really the only way I can answer. I cannot answer that with a mental imaging answer, because I just honestly don't know the answer. I treat a scoot back as an X, because scoot back is essentially a trade. And that center's trade after that, I don't know how to look at it, because you're working across and trading at the same time.
Did you ever get that paper I wrote on the extended stuff?
Yep.
No? Okay. I just sped this up just for the heck of it. Center's trade got us into trouble, but it's cool dancing. It's just Dixie Grand to get out. It's cool dancing. It just was, as I say, you don't have near the flexibility of the site caller, but you got a lot more than a module caller.
Yeah. And that's why in the introduction I said it's a beautiful bridge between modules and site calling.
Mm-hmm.
But it's harder if you have to unlearn site calling to fit this into your template.
Exactly. But it's worth it.
So does anybody else have any more questions for Don? He's graciously given up his time for a couple of hours now, so take advantage of it while it's here.
I
Yes,
haven't
Rose.
got a question, but with learning to call, remembering the 4 people is a real issue for me. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. Because at our club, women dance as men, men dance as women, they swap over, they've got all different corners, different partners, it's always different every set. So if I can do this, it would make my life a lot easier.
It
I
would.
have looked at it before and I got sort of put off by the book with so many exceptions. But even thinking about my calling myself, I'd already realised that all I had to look at is I watch the woman. Number 1 woman, if I'm working in the 4, if I get it back into the same position, I'm there. So it's basically that same system, but expanded.
Yep.
It's also a, if you're working with gay and lesbian groups and aren't used to that and can't keep people straight, this is a good place to start until people start to look familiar.
Yeah.
And blanking
also,
out.
Yeah, where I also
Practicing
found it.
not looking.
Oh, sorry,
go
Rob.
on. Yeah, and practicing not looking at the numbers actually makes you think about it more. So I will do that.
Absolutely.
Mm.
One of the other, for people that are just starting to site call, if you have not picked a system, this is one that I do recommend. Even learning the basic precepts of working below the line with a center, a left, and a right hand, just those basic principles of how that works gives you a lot of material to work with. And if you understand that, it's a good way of learning also to introduce site calling by using isolated site or 2-couple site calling. Because you'll set the number 3 Alaman head square through, you're in the number 3 Alaman position. You can do a 2-couple isolated site, go to the next stage of your X's and O's, move it across the other side into a number 1 position. You can do your 2-couple isolated site, move it back. And it's a good way of bridging that gap and introducing yourself or weaning.
There's a couple things that they're fun to throw in that people just might get a kick out of or interest. But let's reset the square and do a head square through. A lot of people worry about sequence. I know that there's a vertical line through here, and if my active dancer is on the same side of that line as his spot, the men are in sequence. If the active dancer is on the other side of the line, his spot is down here, but the active dancer is up here, so the men are out of sequence. Any place along here, as long as the spot is one of these down here, if he's on the same side of that line, the men are in sequence. If he's on the opposite side of that line, the men are out of sequence. Now, as far as the women, if all X's are canceled, their sequence is the same as the man, either in or out. If all X's, if there's an uncanceled X, the women are in when the men are out, the women are out when the men are in. It's nothing you got to know while you're calling this stuff. But if you're talking to another caller who only worries about sequence, you can quickly look at a situation and say, oh, they're out of sequence. Or the men and the women have different sequence. It's just a coincidence thing you can look at, and it's kind of cool, I think. As I said earlier, an easy way to learn this, if you're really into another system like sight calling, is the next time you teach a beginner's class, start doing it there. Each time you introduce a new call that happens to be an X, as I say, the first one's probably going to be lady's chain. Practice moving the spot around with just that lady's chain and work with that. And then as you add a new call, like swing through, you know it's an X, then you can add that to your repertoire and start moving. I think one of the cool things I learned was that if I can't do an X, I can cancel it with any other X. I don't have to use the same X to cancel it. I don't have, if I call ladies chain at the beginning, head ladies chain, I don't have to call another head ladies chain right away to cancel it. I can use any other X any other time. Mel, I said I wouldn't stay here for 7 hours, but it's been 2 already and I'm having fun.
You can stay as long as you want.
I'll stay as long as, almost as long as there are questions.
On that same subject, is there a way sight callers could use that as an advantage, knowing that men are in, but heck, I've lost where the ladies are? Can they say, well, okay, they're in, let's call an Alaman left and see what I've got, and then sort the ladies out when you get home? Is that a reasonable strategy? Or?
Well, I think the problem with that, Alan, is when I'm sight calling,
You're seeing both. Yeah.
I don't pay any attention to how many X's I've called and how many not. And I guess I could pay attention to whether the men are in sequence, though, well, no, because I may have moved the spot by doing X's here and there. So I don't know what side of that line that the spot is on. So I have troubles mixing them. It's one or the other.
I found with doing that, you have to actually make a concentrated effort. If you're going to set up a spot, then you go to sight calling back to that spot, then you carry on with mental image, then you do sight calling, then you come back to that spot, then you carry on with mental image, if you're going to mix and match. But as I said, I use it as a bridge, and I've only used the basics as a bridge, mainly for feeling a floor out, which I find is really, really great to feel a floor out, because you don't have to worry about who's with who. You can concentrate on watching, follow a square. If I lose my number one man in square that I started watching, go to the number one man in any square. It doesn't matter who it is, follow him. Their square is going to be right. If their square is wrong, it means all the other squares are right. If their square is right, it means all the other squares are right.
I certainly like the idea of using it early up And I've already decided I'm just going to try and use X on, X off as a way of trying to keep track on it. And I'll see how I go anyway. Thanks, Don, and thanks, Mel, for your efforts. Appreciate it. Cheers.
Thank you, Alan. I noticed Paul Capet is in there. Paul, I don't know if you're listening or not, or you just are signed in, but I'm just curious, many years ago, you learned this piece by piece, and I'm just curious whether you kept up with it or switched over to sight, or whether you're there listening or not. If you want to talk, unmute yourself.
I don't know if Paul is here. He was in earlier. He had to duck out for a while. He said he was hoping to get back in, but he never did log out. So I don't know if he is there or not. I think we're going to go with the not.
Yeah. Jeffrey, goodbye. Thank you.
No, I'm just saying that I actually took a 10-year break from calling in the 1980s. I originally learned it in the 1970s, based upon Jay King's book. Steve Turner actually taught it to me. And when I came back in the 90s, I switched back onto mental image. I tried to learn sight calling, and I did for a while get somewhere down the track, but I've always found it much easier to stick with mental image. So that's my comment on it.